So I hope you enjoyed that last conversation I just had with Karen. Now throughout this section, I'm hoping to demonstrate how it is that knowledge builds upon knowledge, ideas build upon ideas. No idea stands alone in isolation. There's nothing I could come out with throughout this course. There's none of my thinking that hasn't been influenced by someone else in some way. So we've looked at Jean Piaget, we have looked at Erik Erikson, some of these guys' ideas in relation to our cognitions and cognitive development. We've then gone on to look at cognitive biases. We've looked at Noam Chomsky's perspective, some of his ways of thinking. Then we went on to explore some of Daniel Kahneman's trains of thought. Here, what I want to do in this video now, I want to bring things back to the father of cognitive behavioural therapy, Mr. Aaron T. Beck, this handsome guy who's looking in this direction of the most common cognitive distortions. Well, this is what he suggested the most common patterns of unhelpful thinking are. Now, cognitive distortions are slightly different from our cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are kind of like attitudes, all right? Attitudes that we take towards people, towards things, and towards life. They're kind of like more beliefs-based than thought patterns, all right? Beliefs are different from our thoughts, all right? Beliefs are a lot more grounded in evidence, whereas thought patterns are just unhelpful thinking styles. This is kind of what cognitive distortions are. So according to the cognitive model of Aaron Beck, a negative outlook on reality would sometimes, well, he would refer to them as schemas or schemata, is a factor in symptoms of poor emotional health and general poor self-effectiveness. Now, it's our cognitive distortions that determine how it is that we assign meaning onto things, right? How we relate to things is determined by how we process information and our experiences, all right? If we have a whole load of cognitive distortions going on, i.e. unhelpful thinking patterns, then we might stand at risk of jumping to wrong conclusions, being at the wrong end of the stick more often than not, all right? So there's quite a big list here. I'm going to go through them. Some of them I'm going to already have given reference to. Remember that ideas just build upon ideas. So Aaron Beck was, he was kind of promoting these ideas the same sort of time that Noam Chomsky, Daniel Kahneman, these guys were talking about cognitive biases. So all of these ideas all encompass and make up the school of cognitive thought in the modern applied psychologies. All right. So, one of the most common cognitive distortions, deletions, distortions, and mental filtering. Now, there are many articles and many reports out there in the world. Some biological scientists would suggest that as human beings, we can have anything up to 150,000 thoughts a day. Other people say that we can have up to 20,000 thoughts a day. Quite a contrast between these two amounts. Other people would say we can have 80 or 90,000 thoughts a day. Now, who on earth could possibly monitor or gauge this is, absolutely, beside me. I just don't have any idea how anyone could kind of calculate statements like this. But here's one thing. Every single day, we undoubtedly are presented with more information than that which we're able to retain. Why? Because at any one given moment in time, we can only ever focus on one thing. Right? Now, remember the factors that influence listening and hearing. I shared this right back at the start of section 1. It is possible for us sometimes, it's possible for you to be watching this video right now, but if you're focused on something that's going on outside, or if you're focused more on what you're thinking about what I'm saying, then you're going to miss what I'm saying. And it's for these reasons that sometimes our brains have this habit of deleting information, sometimes distorting or misinterpreting information. Sometimes we might think we hear something that isn't being said. So we end up taking offense, and not something that someone is actually saying to us, but just at how we're interpreting or perceiving that which is being said. So as Albert Ellis rightly says, it's not people that distress us the most in life, it's actually sometimes our interpretations that distress us and upset us the most in life. Think about the last time that you entered into a debate or an argument with someone. Think about someone who's perhaps recently hurt you. You might have taken offense at something that someone has said or done. Now, if you really focus on this event, this experience, this relationship, there's a pretty good chance that you will be able to explain and define and determine all of the things that this other person said, all of the things that this other person done that impacted how it was that you then went on to feel. But then if I was to ask you to vocalize and take ownership for everything that you said, even if there was some things that you said in the heat of the moment that you didn't mean, all right, what do? We will judge people and take offense at things that people say and things that people do, whilst very rarely taking time to understand the intentions behind them. But when we say and do things, we can justify us saying and doing things that we don't mean to say and do sometimes. Why? Because we understand our intentions, which are always pure. So if we say or do something that we don't mean to say or do, that's okay because we didn't mean to say or do that thing. But if someone else says or does something to us that we don't like, they are bad and their intentions must be wrong. This is a serious cognitive distortions. Our mental filter sometimes allows information that is important to us to get through, but then information that's not too important to us, well, that doesn't get through. That sometimes gets forgotten about. And this is why sometimes if you ever have a conversation with a client and they're telling you all about a problem that they have in their marriage or a problem they have with their manager or boss, they'll give reference to everything that the other person is saying or doing that's bad or wrong or unjust, but they won't always give reference to their unhelpful attitudes, actions, or behaviors. Why? Because we delete information appropriately, all right? And it's not that we do this consciously, it's not like we do this vindictively, but we do it nonetheless through deletions, distortions, and mental filtering. Another cognitive distortion, polarized thinking. This is quite a popular one, right? Black or white thinking. This is when things are good or things are bad and there is no in between. And believe it or not, there will be quite a number of people who will have watched one or two videos of this course. They will have taken offense at something that I've said, or they didn't like my complexion, or didn't like my shirt, or didn't like my Scottish accent, something like this. And they will have said, this is bad, it's black, because it didn't meet my expectations. It's black and white thinking, polarized, where sometimes we expect something to be a certain way, and when it isn't, we end up disappointed. We don't like it. Sometimes we will expect something to be bad, and then it turns out surpassing our expectations, so we then see it as being good. This is when we sometimes judge people very unfairly, when they act perhaps in a way that might differentiate from the way in which we might act or behave or conduct ourselves. So we say, that's bad because we wouldn't do that. That's good because of this reason, because of that reason. Black or white thinking doesn't tend to leave any room for grey. And as we all know, there are 50 Shades of Grey, apparently. Mr. Grey said that in the books, 50 Shades of Grey. It's important for us to understand why. Remember, it's very, very common for people to judge a person because of their actions, their behaviours. We've already discussed this. Say this is good, this is bad, but the reason why can be any shade of the greys that are to be found in between black and white. Overgeneralizations and categorizations. Again, we've already touched on this, so I'm not going to go too much more depth. This is just Aaron Beck's perspective and take on cognitive distortions, unhelpful patterns of thinking. This is when sometimes we will expect more often in the future that which we've had in the past. It might be the case that we relate to all politicians as being bad because we have experienced one or two that might have told us lies at some point in the past. Or we might say all religious people were bad because we know of one or two controlling, manipulative religious people. Well, again, this is just a cognitive distortion. It's about overgeneralizing, branding an entire social group of people as being good or bad or right or wrong because of the actions or attitudes of one or two individuals. And in the same way that you don't like to be judged and categorized, don't judge and categorize. But this is actually how many people end up doing them such a serious disservice in life. Many of your clients will come to you disillusioned in life and disheartened, not knowing how to trust because of the judgments that they've made, the overgeneralizations they've made on mass groups of people. Jumping to conclusions and making assumptions, all right? Now, I sincerely hope that you're not watching this video thinking that none of this stuff applies to you. If you're watching this right now thinking, yeah, Kane, I've heard all this, none of this applies to me, my friend, you are seriously deluded. You are cognitively distorted, all right? Because this is what makes us all imperfect, all right? We have our bodies, we have our minds, we have our hearts, spirits, souls, call these parts of us whatever you want to call them. But it's in our minds that we distort things, all right? And this is what cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of all about. We have events, experiences, highs, lows, relationships, people come and go. And it's not what happens to us in life that impacts us. It's how we interpret that which happens to us in life. And if we have already succumbed to some seriously unhelpful thinking styles, then we're going to end up living this emotional roller coaster throughout life, which is what many people do, which is why CBT is such a popular and one of the most common helping therapies. Because people jump to conclusions. 1 + 1 = 675. We make assumptions, don't we? We think we hear something. So a person's having a conversation with us and they are trying to tell us something, but we're not listening because we're too busy judging them based on the assumption that we've already made, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they're getting it right, whether they're getting it wrong. And all of these judgments and assumptions are going to be spawning out of our cognitive biases. The two walk hand in hand, all right? If we believe that the information that we have is right, then it doesn't really matter the information that another person is going to present us with. If we've already come to the conclusion that we are on the right team, that we have the right information, that our way is the right and only way of, getting things right in life, then that means that we're unconsciously setting everyone else up as being wrong. All right? This might sound and seem like a really simple set of ideas, but this is where people end up completely deluding themselves in life, getting so completely confused, and it all happens inside of the mind. Know thyself, understand how thine interprets information and events and experiences, because when you do, it sets you up to be able to make wiser and better informed decisions about how it is that we actually respond. Catastrophizing, worst case scenarioizing, if that's even a word. Now come on, when was the last time that it felt like your world was going to end? Doom and gloom. Let's go for the example here of students who go through the standardized educational system and have spent all of these years studying all of these topics and all of these various classes, and they've got their exams at the end of the year. And they want to pass their exams so they can get some certificates and then hopefully go and get a job. Now, don't we know that certificates are not representative of competence or insight or skill? All that certificates really do is just represent the fact that a person has attended a course and has been able to retain some information. So certification is certainly no representation of competence, but when we are going through school, there's nothing more important to us, is there, than passing our exams and getting those bits of paper that we can hang on the wall and go and celebrate with our friends. Now, at the start of the academic year, say in the final year of a young person's studies, they're not going to have too much pressure going on because they've got lots of time to study and research and grow and develop and learn. But around about 2 weeks before the exams are due to take place, what happens? Well, how many young people do you know end up getting super stressed and they end up panicking, having panic attacks and getting medication for anxiety, which is blatantly a mental health illness. It's not just a response to the catastrophic thinking that's going on inside of their minds. I'm going to fail my exams. I'm not ready. Oh my goodness. I'm not smart enough. I'm not that enough. Oh my goodness, I'm going to fail. What's that going to mean about my future? People emotionally respond and react to the thoughts that go through their heads. ABC. Activating events do not equal consequences or emotional responses. It's the beliefs and the thought patterns and the cognitive distortions and the cognitions and the biases, that's what results in us feeling the way that we do sometimes, all right? We've got to own this as CBT practitioners, or we ain't gonna be no good to our clients. So we do this. We look to the future and we catastrophize and we expect the worst case scenarios rather than the best, and then our emotions roll accordingly. Personalizations. Now, I think in the last section, I gave reference to this term, self-consumptionitis. So let's come back and revisit this. How many conversations have you had with people in the past? And this, you're maybe talking about yourself, you're talking about something that's just really meaningful, really important to you, perhaps the death of a loved one, or you're talking about a concern or a relationship issue that you have. And then this other person, rather than listening to you and really seeking to understand you, they butt in, they interrupt, and suddenly the whole conversation becomes all about them. You'll say, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit apprehensive at the moment. And then suddenly, oh, I totally know what you mean. I once had this time. I once had this experience. Oh, I can totally relate. And then they go on to tell you all about them. And basically, what they've just shown you is that they weren't listening to you. They weren't interested in you. All they were doing was just simply relating everything you said to themselves through this process of personalization, all right? Self-consumptionitis. Have you ever wondered what it is keeps a person completely isolated and disconnected in life? I mean, don't you know that it is true, sometimes we can have a quantity of people in our lives, we can have lots of acquaintances, we can know lots of people, have lots of mates and things like that, we can be associated with lots of people, but at the same time still feel completely isolated, like we're completely disconnected. Why? Well, a lot of this has to do with how it is that we process life, information. If we are interacting with people, just simply relating everything that another person's saying to our own experience, and then we become completely overwhelmed and immersed in our own experience, what we will consequentially be showing other people is that we're not interested in them. The only person that we're actually interested in is ourselves. All right? CBT, did I happen to mention, this is a very, very practical, pragmatic set of life insights, life skills, which if we can master, if we can overcome ourselves, we in turn become qualified and extremely competent in helping other people to also overcome themselves. Overcoming oneself might seem like quite an abstract term to use, but it's not. Overcome thyself. Get over thyself. How many times do you hear people say this today? Get over yourself. Just get over yourself. What they're saying is, stop personalizing everything. The whole world isn't about you, and the second that life stops being all about you is the same second that you're going to start identifying, recognizing, seeing, hearing, and listening to other people far more effectively. That will result in more meaningful connections and deeper, more profound relationships being forged. All right, everything has a consequence. So, self-victimization, learned helplessness. This is a tough one, right? This is when a person will look to the events of their past. Mummy dropped me on my head. Daddy never gave me enough cuddles. I experienced this traumatic event. Oh, woe is me, right? This is where everything starts getting really extreme. And a person becomes so immersed in a past life experience or an event, they just focus on it, and they focus on it, and they focus on it, and they focus on it, and then they become completely immersed in it, and they feel it, and they live there. This becomes their permanent abode. Now, many mental health professionals, doctors, nurses would say it's post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, what we focus on in life, we feel as cognitive behavioral therapists, what we understand is that emotions aren't illnesses, they're not feelings. If a person contracts an illness or a condition like the DSM defines them, there's nothing that we can do for them. But if every emotion that we experience is just the result of a thought that we're having, or a cognitive distortion, or a cognitive bias, or some sort of unhelpful perspective that we're taking towards life, we can change that. and then deem a victim to become a victor, or a powerless person to become a powerful person. Remember, when we take responsibility for ourselves, we become automatically empowered to change. All right, this is the cognitive way of thinking and way of looking at life. Learned helplessness. Now, let's look at a practical way. So, as a CBT, so say for example, you set up a practice at some point as a coach, as a practitioner, whatever you want to do. It might just be the case you go to volunteer at a local charity group, or you start mentoring people. This is a fantastic and a massively powerful set of life skills and insights to have. Some people will come to you and they will say, but I can't change. This is just who I am. I am incapable of change. Well, a wise man once said to me that there's no such thing as can't. Can't actually is just won't. When people say I can't change, what they are actually meaning is I am not ready to change or willing to change yet. Remember, people will not change until the desire to change becomes greater than the desire to remain the same. Please forgive me if I'm being a little bit repetitive here, but life is not so complex. It isn't, all right? People just overcomplicate life inside of their own minds. So, victims. Well, the way that we can look at victimhood, if a person's a victim, that must mean there's going to be a bad guy. If there's a bad guy, then a victim's generally going to be waiting for a hero to come along. There might be a little diagram or an illustration I can share with you shortly to really help you deepen your appreciation of this victim triangle. Helplessness is often learned. When a person perhaps tries, fails, fails. What did Master Yoda once say? There is no try, there is only do or don't do. Trying, I always see trying as being quite half-hearted. I've tried, oh I've failed. I've tried, oh I've failed. It all depends on our outlook on life, all right? We're either going to commit to a course of action to accomplish a certain outcome, or we're going to try to change something, but secretly we're really hoping that someone's going to come along and make change happen for us. Learned helplessness. I am incapable. I am not strong enough. I am not smart enough. I am not strong enough. I am not this enough. I am not that enough to accomplish the kind of lifestyle that I actually want to be living. Therefore, I need a hero to come along and save me, to crave the way for me, to make it all happen. Sometimes if a person has an overbearing parent, now, there's a guy that I worked with for a few sessions and I stopped working with him. He was in his late 40s and he still lived with his mum. His mum was in her late 70s and I did actually meet her once in the passing. My goodness, what an interesting lady. Very strong personality, very strong character. I've never, ever witnessed a relationship like this before. This is like a 70-odd-year-old lady and she would speak to this 47-year-old man, honestly, like he was a 5-year-old child. And this man had never left home. He'd gone and got a job, and in fact, this man operated in quite a high-functioning role. I think he was a managing director for some steel company. But then he would go home on a night time after finishing work, and his mum would cook him his meals and tidy his room and do his washing for him. And he'd never actually been in a situation where he needed to take responsibility for himself. So he'd learned helplessness. He'd learned it. Anyone who says that I can't, well, that's just an expression of learned helplessness. Self-victimization. I'm the victim. Life's been hard on me. I've been dealt an unfair hand in life. That's never the case. It's just a cognitive distortion. It's just worst-case scenario-izing, if you like, right? Not a helpful way of looking at life whatsoever.